Well, the Leveson inquiry into media ethics and the relationship between politicians and the press has resumed in London. Among today's witnesses is Andy Coulson, the former editor of the News of the World and later media advisor to the British Prime Minister David Cameron. Well, to bring us up to date, we're joined now from London by our correspondent Lisa Millar. Lisa, what is going to happen in this next phase of the inquiry?
Well, Tony, even though we've heard various witnesses touch on the issues of the relationship between the press and politics, this is actually the official start of Module 3. And Justice Leveson, in his preamble, has already raised a few questions that he wants answered, or would like to hope will be answered, and that is, what is the balance in that relationship between the press and politicians in the UK? Is it a balance that has slipped in favour of the press, and is that now unacceptable, and what can be done about righting that balance? So some pretty heavy questions that are going to be asked. Likewise, some heavy-hitting witnesses, including David Cameron, the Prime Minister, and Tony Blair, the prior Prime Minister. But as you said, the first two key witnesses, certainly Andy Coulson, just in a matter of moments, and Rebekah Brooks tomorrow.
Well, tomorrow is going to be especially interesting, but Andy Coulson, there's a lot of speculation that he might dump on his former boss, David Cameron. Any hints as to what he might say?
Well, unfortunately, more hints about what you're not going to get, because he was one of the ones arrested. Justice Leveson has already said, if you're looking for forensic fireworks, then turn to some kind of fictional trial, because you're not going to get it here. There's certainly been a suggestion that he will have to be forced to reveal the kind of relationship that he had with David Cameron. He sat on both sides of the fence here, because Andy Coulson was editor of News of the World, had to quit when one of his reporters was jailed, and then ended up working for David Cameron, first for the Conservative Party and then for him as Prime Minister. So it's going to be very difficult for him not to be forced to reveal a lot about that relationship and what it was before he started working for the now Prime Minister.
OK, briefly, Lisa, counsel assisting Lord Leveson, Robert Jay, had a few things to say about Rupert Murdoch's evidence today.
Yes, it was more sort of like a revision of what Rupert Murdoch had to say, but one of the points that the press gallery leapt on, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of discussion about, is this 1981 lunch with Margaret Thatcher that Rupert Murdoch hadn't remembered. He'd been forced to recall it before he gave evidence, but Robert Jay, the lead counsel, has suggested that Rupert Murdoch perhaps had selective amnesia about that lunch. It was just before he wanted to buy the Times newspaper, and he's gone on to say, Robert Jay, that if there was this selective amnesia, then perhaps it casts some question about Rupert Murdoch's integrity. So a line of thought that no doubt will be mused over by many who've watched this intently.
OK, Lisa, thanks for joining us, and apologies for a few technical issues with that interview.